Hello and welcome to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, joining me as he always does in this lovely Friday edition where we go over all things injuries. PFF's Nic Bodiford. Nick, how's it going, man?
I'm great. How are you, Ian?
Great day to be great as always, man. Got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. Unfortunately, there was one very notable injury on Thursday. Prayers up for Tua Tagovailoa. After that nasty hit that for some reason we had to watch 200 times afterwards. Good news is that Tua was able to get discharged and flew back on the plane. That's how we got the ridiculous McGruber story about him watching and laughing that alongside Mike McDaniel on the plane. So could have seemingly been a lot worse, and it was bad. Regardless, not making light of concussions. I had to retire from football personally because of concussions, so I know just how bad they can be. But either way, just get better, Tua, please, because better football league when Tua's out there doing his thing. So with that now in the rearview mirror, again, we're going to be going through every single fantasy relevant injury ahead of Sunday. I've gone through every single injury report, and if you missed something I say, don't worry. I already wrote an article on it that you can find up at pff.com. So appreciate you guys tuning in. And with that said, we're going to start off with the quarterback position. So Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert dealing with this ribs issue did get upgraded to a full practice on Thursday, and will start Sunday against the Texans. So just the fact that he did get that full practice upgrade does help me believe that he is at least, closer to full health, hopefully back, his usual just elite level effectiveness and production. We are going to be without one of my favorite guys to watch in football, Jameis Winston, back and ankle, listed as doubtful, fully expecting much less aggressive quarterback Andy Dalton to be starting. And yes, Nick, I think it really is as simple as everyone's making out to be. You take away Jameis, who right now is on pace to shatter basically the PFF record for average target depth in the season. You put in Andy Dalton, and all of a sudden Alvin Kamara's target problems should be gone.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wrote up Olave as a player to target, as one of the 5 players to target in my weekly wide receiver cornerback matchups column. But I went in this morning, and I think I updated to say that I think Jarvis Landry might be the DFS player. He's got a good matchup against Chandon Sullivan. And to your point about the average depth of target, Olave's is like, I think it's 20.5.
It's ridiculous.
Which is absurd. Dalton's average depth of target is 7.6. Landry's is 11.2. So I think those two are going to jive a little bit better. But yeah, Kamara, he could just eat here.
Slight downgrade for Olave, but we'll get to in a little bit with the wide receivers. Michael Thomas is out with a foot injury, so I think Olave is still going to have plenty of targets to go, get his money's worth, but that air yard total might not be as gaudy as we're used to seeing. Do need to keep an eye on Landry as well. Questionable with an ankle injury, obviously does still have a, seemingly good chance to go get out there. Probably going to have Traquan Smith stepping in 3 wide receiver sets. More on that in just a bit. Patriots quarterback Mac Jones ruled out as expected with that ankle injury. Brian Hoyer is now going to start this week 4 matchup in Lambeau. Stay away from this offense if you can. I know Ramondre Stevenson finally has that role that we like. And okay, I'm not saying you can't start him under any circumstances, but this Patriots offense is implied to score 15.5 points. I mentioned that implied total a lot. And just, if you don't know, like every game gets a spread and you get your over under. And by that, you can basically see how many points each team is implied to score. Then you can rank those to get a better idea of each offense instead of always going off of the combined over under. So yeah, brutal, terrible. We don't want to address them if we can avoid it. Jets quarterback Zach Wilson, not listed on the final injury report. He is good to start his first game of the year after dealing with this knee injury. I would love to see a full week's worth of Zach Wilson looking healthy and maybe looking like he has slightly better decision-making than last year before being overly confident about anyone involved. I mean, Nick, we saw this last year when Mike White and Joe Flacco were under center, and even Josh Johnson force-feeding, Michael Carter and even Ty Johnson these targets, making them both look like superstars. Zach Wilson comes back, plays the style, just so differently. And accordingly, we saw the running backs targets crater, and we saw a banged up group of wide receivers not putting up the same sort of numbers as they were with other quarterbacks under center. So not saying you can't start guys like Garrett Wilson or Elijah Moore, but if it's a close start sit question, I'm probably going to be picking the other guy. And finally, Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott will be back week 5 at the earliest. He has already been ruled out with the right thumb injury. International sensation Cooper Rush back under center for this matchup against the Commanders. Nick, you do a bunch of DFS work all week, and I do have a nice podcast you guys can check out over at Roto Grinders. My guy Britt Devine record every Friday, and I was just looking through the slate, and Jamal Williams shaping up to be one of the chalkiest players out there with DeAndre Swift sidelined. What do you think about maybe pivoting in tournaments to Ezekiel Elliott, who is a home favorite against a Washington defense that hasn't exactly been shut down this year? I mean, it is Zeke, but hey, Zeke has looked relative to, I think, past seasons, better and more spry than usual.
That's interesting. I hadn't really considered Zeke. I'm looking at so he's only projected for 2.8% ownership. Yeah, on DraftKings. Seems like a fine GPP play to me.
Great day to be great, some might say. All right, rest of the running back position now. Colts running back Jonathan Taylor, absolutely good to go with the toe injury. It's like, I understand that McCaffrey is indeed more hurt, but it is kind of hilarious to me that Taylor didn't practice on Wednesday, and I felt like I didn't even hear about it until I was kind of going through today, getting this ready. But, McCaffrey, like, it's a hangnail at practice, and it's the biggest thing in the news for the next week and a half. Unfortunately, though, McCaffrey with this thigh injury is someone that you need to have a backup plan for. Now, it sounds okay. Coach Matt Rule said that he is, quote unquote, very hopeful for CMC, and Rap Sheet, like later when he was actually tweeting about it, said that he is indeed expected to play. So I would have McCaffrey in your RB1 spot going in, anticipating he's going to play, but try to have a backup option. You're not going to have anyone as good as McCaffrey. So don't give me the Christian McCaffrey or, Kenneth Gainwell start sit questions. It's going to be McCaffrey because we are confident that he is going to play, but it is a matchup at 4 p.m. Eastern. So just have a backup plan, but it's not nearly as bad as, some of those like Buccaneers or Chiefs questions we have for Sunday night. Vikings running back Dalvin Cook seemed like it could be an issue where we were going to get an Alexander Madison spot start after last week, but he's good to go. He was already practicing in full on Thursday, not even listed on the final injury report. So Dalvin Cook, lineups of all shapes and sizes going up against this Lions 32nd ranked scoring defense. Also got to keep it. Oh, I'm sorry, not the Lions. I wrote that wrong in my article. Damn, Ian. They're playing the Saints in London in the 9:30 a.m. game. So either way, Dalvin Cook, every single fantasy lineup out there. It's Dalvin Cook. We saw him playing through this last year against the Steelers, and the dude went for over 200 yards. So continue to fire him up. Again, lineups of all shapes and sizes. The more interesting one is Saints running back Alvin Kamara. He is listed as questionable in this one. Now, he was able to practice, throughout the week in a limited fashion. So I'm thinking Kamara is going to play through this. Nick, do you have any reason to believe that Kamara is not going to be out there? He's got the red rocket under center now. He wants to go catch 10 passes.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen anything that would indicate that he's not going to play. The two headliners there are, one guy that we've already talked about, and then another that I'm sure we'll touch on in a little bit.
All right, Lions running back DeAndre Swift officially ruled out with that ankle and shoulder injury. Jamal Williams, my RB12 on the week. Last year, 3 games without Swift, 20, 18, and 19 touches. And that was with mediocre snap rates because Jamal Williams was playing through the paint in his own right. So I do think we'll see some Craig Reynolds out there, but it should be overwhelmingly Jamal Williams. Again, top 12 running back. If you have a lineup that doesn't have Jamal Williams in it, it better be sick. And I would advise you to, get out of that 4-team league that you happen to be in. Cardinals running back James Conner, good to go, not listed on the final injury report with the knee injury. Always in that, upside RB2 conversation with as much weekly multi-touchdown upside as anyone. Interesting spot in Baltimore. J.K. Dobbins was listed with a chest injury, but he practiced in full on Thursday and Friday. So no injury designation, but seemingly he is fully past that knee issue. And they, obviously played him last week and everything. But Nick, we did see a split backfield with Justice Hill and J.K. Dobbins last week. I'm not completely hands off Dobbins right now. I think he's, a viable flex in deeper leagues. I'd still like to see maybe a little bit more in the usage department before we get back to, treating Dobbins as that, top 24 running back that a lot of people were hoping he'd be once he's back out on the field.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. I do think that we just because he came back last week does not mean that he is done rehabilitating from the injury. So I do feel comfortable waiting to believe it until we see it.
Packers running back A.J. Dillon, perfectly good to go for Sunday. Had a limited practice earlier in the week with the knee issue, but yeah, should be seeing plenty of, second half volume. Packers 9-point home favorites against these Brian Hoyer-led Patriots. Great day to be an A.J. Dillon or Aaron Jones fantasy manager. Also a great day to be a Khalil Herbert fantasy manager because Bears running back David Montgomery out with knee and ankle injuries. Herbert averages 7.3 yards per carry, and when I tweeted that, someone reminded me that Justin Fields only averages 6.6 yards per pass attempt. Absolutely mad stuff. I would start Khalil Herbert ahead of guys like Cordero Patterson, who's questionable in his own right, Javonte Williams, James Conner, A.J. Dillon, guys that just aren't going to have as, fantasy friendly really of a role as Khalil Herbert's being set up for against a Giants defense that in a matchup where I don't think the Bears are going to get completely blown out of the water. Man, the fact that one of these Bears or Giants teams are going to be 3-1 this time next week, Nick, I'm not sure America is ready to comprehend that just yet. Falcons running back, though, Cordero Patterson, my guy, I mentioned it. He is questionable. He did manage to squeeze in a limited practice on Friday. This one's interesting, Nick, because they listed him out with a combination of his knee injury and rest. The Falcons play at 1 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, so, we should know. We should have plenty of kind of backup plans, worst case. I tend to think Patterson's more on the probable side than the doubtful side of this questionable. That's not from a report. It's just them kind of listing him with the knee, with the rest also attached to that, and us not really seeing this big issue come. Like, when did it happen in the game? We didn't see any issues with Patterson last week. What's your read on the situation?
Yeah, it's bizarre. I noticed the rest thing too. Now the rest is gone. He got unlimited participation today, so by NFL standards, he should be good to go. But it does tell us that we have something to monitor probably for the rest of the year. This kind of quiet knee thing, it seems kind of like it might just be arthritis or something like that, because we don't have. I assume that the Twitter doctors would have already found an impact play had it happened. So it's just something to monitor. I recommend everybody make sure that Tyler Algier is on their roster if he's a free agent.
I want a world, Nick, where the beat reporters that get to spend all week around these teams and the national insiders that, have millions of Twitter followers and they have all the sources for days. Just, instead of just literally copy and pasting what the team account tells us that Cordero Patterson is questionable, maybe something if he is going to have a better chance to play, or maybe you could explain this backfield that without Cordero Patterson is going to be in complete flux for fantasy managers to figure out. I know Tyler Algier is expecting to lead the way. He has been the early down back here alongside Cordero Patterson. And, one of the cool stats I found coming into the draft was that out of all the draft eligible running backs, Tyler Algier, Dameon Pierce, and two guys who I forget their names were the only four that actually had, PFF grades of, I think it was 70 plus in receiving, rushing, and pass blocking. So they're just really complete 3-down backs. So it's not that Tyler Algier can't handle this 3-down role, but man, we saw this last year when CPAT missed time. We thought it was going to be the Mike Davis show, and then Quadri Allison comes out of nowhere and works ahead of him. We still have Avery Williams there. We still have Caleb Huntley on the practice squad, probably going to get elevated again if CPAT's out. Tyler Algier, man, he would get a nice boost if Cordero Patterson is out of it. I'm not denying that, but when it's Algier versus Breece Hall or Algier versus even Michael Carter, I'm still probably picking those guys.
I agree. Algier might just be a DFS play or, a strangely deep, 14-teamer. It is important to note that the Cleveland Browns defense is really banged up. And I think that they are going to have maybe more guys than we initially anticipated they were going to have. But this was a team that I focused on a lot in the matchups columns and in the DFS column. They have, I think it's 7 defensive starters or 6 starters plus Chase Winovich, who are either out or dealing with a serious injury right now. So on paper, this looks like a scary matchup. It's not. I think that we can keep our Falcons, especially the passing game guys, going.
Yeah, I'm going Marcus Mariota as my probable cash game quarterback this week. Myles Garrett and Clowney didn't practice all week, are both listed as questionable. To your point, they did get Denzel Ward and Jock, their linebacker, seemingly back. They're not listed on the final report. So that's good at least. But yeah, hey, Falcons top 10, I believe, scoring offense. Keep on keeping on, perhaps. But yeah, Tyler Algier, someone, as I'm looking at my ranks, that'll be updated on the lovely PFF app here shortly once I'm done recording this podcast. Like, I would play him ahead of like Darrell Henderson and, some of the scat backs like Naeem Hines and JD McKissick. I would start, Tony Pollard, Rashad Penny, the Jets, the Jaguars, all the Patriots, and those guys, though, ahead of Tyler Algier. All right, small, actually, small thing that I think is actually a big thing. So, just great way of explaining myself here. Eagles running back Boston Scott is out with a rib injury. Miles Sanders, limited early in the week with a hip issue, but he's good to go. We got a 2 running back backfield seemingly now, Nick. Now, I announced this on Twitter, and someone, said that Trey Sermon's going to get 15 carries out of nowhere. So, yes, that is a possibility. And Jalen Hurts always remains, a threat to steal touches at the goal line. But for now, Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell look like they're going to be forming a 2 running back committee in a potential shootout between the Eagles and the Jaguars. I think Sanders can be elevated, towards the top of this RB2 kind of tier we always have with the early down guys that we wish were more involved in the passing game. I mean, Miles Sanders, for me, I would go with him, yes, ahead of James Robinson, ahead of Jeff Wilson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Josh Jacobs is very close. I still lean Sanders for the time being. And Gamewell and DFS, man, especially on a full PPR site like DraftKings, God forbid the Jaguars jump out to a lead. Maybe all of a sudden we see Gamewell getting more involvement. Overall thoughts on this Eagles backfield? Because again, it's weird how we have, all these backfields with sometimes these mobile quarterbacks in Baltimore, Buffalo, Philly. And when there's 3 running backs involved as well, it's tough for any of those guys to get the opportunities they need. But we're just looking for 1 week, man. I mean, even Devin Singletary, guys like that, they can pop off on occasion. Maybe, Nick, this is the Miles Sanders or Kenneth Gainwell week.
Well, what's interesting about this, I think it was Pat Kerrane who was tweeting through basically this as this matchup as a whole, and the quietly strong part of the Jaguars defense is their run defense. And so, yes, this might end up being the week that Sanders really gets to run free. Or at least that they hope that he can. But the problem here is he's going up against a tough matchup. And I kind of wonder if this is just like a pure shootout. What I was looking up while you were talking here was just route participation between the backfield through the first 3 weeks. And it looks okay. So Sanders is kind of comfortably ahead. So he could still get the job done, but I think it'll be maybe through the air rather than on the ground.
Don't hate that, Colin. I love when we got our guy Pat Kerrane, backing us up too. Been on the pod several times. Truly one of my favorite people in the industry. Give him a follow on Twitter. Why the hell not? At Pat Kerrane. Great date to be great there. All right, yeah. So Miles Sanders and even Kenneth Gainwell, nice little more bumps than usual without Boston Scott. A few more quick ones. Broncos running back Melvin Gordon, good to go. Had a neck issue going on, which not ideal, but doesn't have a final injury designation, so I guess he's fine. Javonte, mid-tier RB2. Melvin mid-tier RB3. Hopefully the Mike Boone thing last week was more so just a blip on the radar as opposed to a sign of things to come. If it happens again, then I will, downgrade these guys accordingly. But I really think, man, the Broncos, they're 31st ranked scoring offense right now. I get it. Maybe Russ isn't going to be cooking to the extent that we all thought, but 31st, I think they're going to boom up at some point. Wouldn't be surprised if we get it here against Max Crosby and company. Also a note, Texans running back Dameon Pierce, all good to go after this hip injury, and even said that he expects to see his full workload. So your usual volume-based, borderline RB2, RB3. I just worry about this Houston Texans offense doing much of anything. These guys are getting no help from the front offense, no help from the scheme. It's just tough, man. Dameon Pierce has been out there really being good. If you look at his missed tackles force and his yards after contact and this stuff, he's been above average, but the problem is everything else in his offense is shit. When we guys, before the season, we had our awesome quad force on the PFF app in the 4 main categories. We had kind of strength of schedule, which doesn't quite apply here, but the 3 things were talent, their offensive environment, and then their just ability to get touches, their usage, talent, offense, and usage. And Dameon Pierce, really, man, he has a talent, seemingly. That's great, but the offense is miserable, and the usage, as long as Rex Burkhead is still taking that pass down stuff, just isn't ideal. And I don't really see those latter 2 things changing anytime soon. So that's the only problem with Pierce, and I really am not against selling high-ish on him if people still kind of have that whole August just hoopla kind of fresh in their mind about what his true ceiling is in fantasy football. Because I think we're basically seeing his ceiling right now. It's as a lead early down back in a terrible offense that isn't likely to get any better this season. Final running back note, Tyrion Davis-Price expected to still miss multiple weeks. So Jeff Wilson, again, man, a sneaky solid candidate to see 20-plus touches here on Monday night against the Rams. My RB21 this week, I would start him ahead of CEH and Ramondre Stevenson, among others. Appreciate the YouTube gang, getting some wide receiver stuff now, but I can get to a couple start sits. Why the hell not? Drake London or Chris Olave from our guy, Tyler Kelly. God, this one is close, man, because I was telling myself Olave over London without Michael Thomas, but then when you take Jameis out of the picture, I think we got to go with Drake London, right, Nick?
Agreed. Yep.
Yeah, Drake London doing some absolutely great stuff to start this season. Appreciate you. I know, man. He is sick. Appreciate you, Samuel. Who should I start in place of Michael Thomas, Jacoby Myers, Jahan Dotson, or Isaiah McKenzie? I would go with Jahan Dotson out of that group. Jacoby isn't guaranteed to start either. Isaiah McKenzie, it does look like Gabriel Davis is going to play, and but Crowder there. Do you think McKenzie versus Dotson's a conversation? Where do you land on that, Nick?
Yeah, that's hard. So I think that the matchup for Washington shapes at best as a Curtis Samuel game because of the Dallas pass rush and where Curtis Samuel is being used on the field. But what do you make of Isaiah McKenzie's situation right now? Because
here's the problem. Here's the problem with this, and I'm happy we brought this up because I didn't want to forget this. There are a couple games with severe weather concerns. Not Tampa somehow, good for my namesake, I guess, not fucking up Sunday at least. Everything else wasn't very good. But Hurricane Ian apparently not causing big issues for the Tampa Bay game. They're keeping the game there. And I looked at the Sunday night forecast, and there's not even extra wind or anything like that. So I love the weather tool over at Roto Grinders, a fantastic website, friends of the pod. And, with Kevin Roth giving us his always awesome weather edge, just does a good job telling us, the games that potentially have issues. And the one game he does have as an orange, so not quite a red, but an orange, is Buffalo and Baltimore. 20-mile-per-hour wind expected, strong gusts, and a chance for rain. Jacksonville, Philly, Chicago, and New York, those are also games that have a chance for rain, but lesser wind. That 20-mile-per-hour mark is usually when we start to get concerned. So I know McKenzie is a little bit more gadgety than most, and he could, if there was going to be a wide receiver to kind of be okay in the wind and stuff, it'd be someone with a lower ADOT like him sometimes. That's tough. I'm going to give this slight edge to Jahan Dotson. And same goes for Sun God, Terry McLaurin, Elijah Moore, or Jacoby Myers. A little bit easier. I think that one's Terry McLaurin. Let's get a week of the Zach Wilson experience before getting too crazy. All right, let's talk some wide receivers. Just we're talking about the Bills, actually. Jake Kumaro is out, at least, for Isaiah McKenzie with that ankle injury, but it does look like Gabriel Davis is going to play because he personally said, I'm playing Sunday. Again, borderline wide receiver too. We need him to score touchdowns, but guess what? He's playing with Josh Allen's, certainly has a chance to be in that potential shootout against the Ravens if Mother Nature cooperates. Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas out with the foot injury. Jarvis Landry questionable with an ankle. Traquan Smith good to go from the concussion protocol. Low-key over 100 yards last week. Deontay Hardy good to go with the foot. So with Thomas out, again, we kind of already talked about Chris Olave. If we had Jameis under center, man, Chris Olave would be like a must-start top 15 option, but we don't. So with Andy Dalton, I do think Chris Olave is more of a borderline wide receiver 2 type. Like Nick, when you talk about Amari Cooper versus Chris Olave, who you got?
Oh, wow. Actually, probably Amari Cooper. That's really tough, though.
That's a tough one. Yep. That's about it. I have Amari Cooper ranked wide receiver 25, might bump him up a spot. I think I'm going to have Chris Olave just outside of my top 24. He's an upside wide receiver 3 this week. Andy Dalton is still capable of throwing a ball more than 5 yards downfield. I'm not afraid of the matchup, by any stretch of the imagination. So let's not get completely out of, the Chris Olave business. Just realize would have been a lot cooler if Jameis Winston was still out there. And yes, as Nick said before, Jarvis Landry, if you're waking up early, playing a little bit of showdown with the Saints, could be someone to target there in DFS land. With the Lions, the Sun God, he's out. Amon-Ra St. Brown with the ankle injury. And we also have DJ Chark and Josh Reynolds questionable with ankle injuries in their own right. I've seen people just immediately yell, Chark week, like we've never freaking heard that one before. Come on, folks. Be more creative out there on the Twitter sphere. It's not that hard. But we also have DeAndre Swift out with an ankle and shoulder injury. So For sure, the top two options are out. The next two top receivers at least aren't working at 100%. This tells me TJ Hawkinson might get 30 targets, but otherwise, Nick, we have TJ Hawkinson and we have Jamal Williams, and that's great, and they should be started everywhere. Otherwise, I really don't want much to do with this offense.
So I wrote up Josh Reynolds as a player to target this week. I like his matchup against Tariq Woolen. Seattle defense is very, very bad. Yeah, this one I mean it's again that one might be in terms of redraft maybe another like 14 team or large roster 12 team kind of a play, but DFS I would totally roll the dice on Josh Reynolds.
That's fair. And I'm not saying you can't. There are flex situations. I have a 14-team league with 3 flex spots, and I will be starting Josh Reynolds and Mac Hollins again this week in that league. So I get it. You get to points where you do it or you have injuries and stuff. But like Josh Reynolds and DJ Chark, I'm going to have a hard time getting them higher than, like wide receiver 45, wide receiver 46 once I update those. All right. Packers wide receiver Allen Lazard and Christian Watson good to go. Lazard just continuing to be hobbled a little bit by this ankle injury, but Watson's being back actually isn't great news for Romeo Doubs, because we did see the Doubs explosion happen without Watson and without Sammy Watkins, who remains on IR. So I'm not saying you can't go in all in on the Romeo Doubs business, but I have him ranked right now wide receiver 40, right behind Josh Palmer, Allen Robinson, Juju Smith-Schuster. I am going to keep him there with Watson being back. So Lazard, my wide receiver 36, solid wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 types. What could be interesting, and out of all the injury reports in the NFL, the Patriots are the most annoying in that you can't never tell what's happening in terms of guys being questionable and if they're going to play or not. And this week, man, Patriots secondary, they have 3 safeties, and Kyle Duggar, Adrian Phillips, and Joshua Bledsoe, all questionable with various injuries. And then Jalen Mills is questionable with a hamstring injury, one of their starting cornerbacks. So, hey, I know it's Bill Belichick's defense. He'll take away your number 1 player, yada, yada, yada. But maybe in this matchup, Nick, a nice little GPP play in, DFS land could be targeting this Packers passing attack.
Yeah, I'm in on Dubs. I think that he won the role, or at least it's his to lose now after what he did last week. I was tweeting about this, and shout out to the Established to Run guys for catching the LaFleur press conference where he talked about how Dubs was winning against man coverage. Lazard did technically out-target, but anyway, you can find it on my Twitter. The point is, I think that Dubs has the role, and I'm not really afraid of Watson coming back because I think that they're playing different. They're doing different things for this team. Dubs is the X receiver. Watson, I think he is the MVS field stretcher, and Allen Lazard is going to, keep being underwhelming.
Nate, we would go with Dobbs, and that starts sick question. Great day to be great, sir. All right, Chargers wide receiver Keenan Allen seemingly re-aggravated that hamstring issue Thursday practice. He has been ruled out. And if you missed it earlier this week, Jalen Guyton, their field stretcher, got put on IR with a knee injury. So Mike Williams, he needs to be in lineups of all shapes and sizes. Don't look at just one game last week where he still scored a touchdown, because he's a freaking beast. Literally the week before, we were all creaming ourselves on Thursday night over him going freaking off on, just again, over 100 yards, nearly had 2 touchdowns there. So the Mike Williams thing is ridiculous. We just disregard his great games, and when he busts, we just have nothing other to talk about. So get Mike Williams in all these lineups. They're playing the Texans. Justin Herbert is at quarterback. I saw some projected ownership for Mike Williams. I was like acting like no one's even going to be on the dude this week. I really just wish humans had a longer memory than 7 days sometimes, but hey, we'll take advantage of it. Mike Williams should be in everyone's, I think, top 12 should be, I think. Good one, Ian. But yeah, top 12 wide receiver, in my opinion. He will at least be so in mine. And then with Josh Palmer, man, one game after another with Keenan Allen or Mike Williams out of the picture, continues to put up big numbers. And without Guyton, it really could be an extra 40, 50 air yards for him in this one. I know Palmer already had beaten out Guyton as the number 3 receiver, but they really don't have a field stretcher now without Guyton, even though he wasn't used a ton. So now expect, nice more Justin Herbert air yards. The few times he does them with Joe Lombardi going it downfield. Joshua Palmer, someone that, again, I would start even over guys like Romeo Doubs, Zay Jones, Julio Jones, Elijah Moore, and others this week. Speaking of some of those Buccaneers receivers, Chris Godwin, Julio Jones, both questionable, both game time decisions with the hamstring and knee injury. Russell Gage seems more questionable than normal too. He actually got downgraded to a DMP on Friday. He's been questionable during all these weeks in his own right with the hamstring issue, apparently not super healthy. And for good measure, Brashad Perryman with a knee and hamstring injury, also doubtful. So at least Mike Evans is back, but yeah, Tom Brady, any closer start sit questions with him. I'll probably continue to pick the other guy until he gets more of these dudes back. So it is better that he got Evans, obviously, and facing the Chiefs. We could see a shootout, and apparently not impacted weather. I keep bringing that up because I pounded the under when I freaking heard they were going to stay in Tampa, Nick, and now I'm going to have to watch Mahomes and freaking Brady not go over. That's going to be a great little Sunday night for me. But just with these wide receivers, they're playing Sunday night. It's going to be really tough to expect them to be in their full-time roles. And you're probably not going to have very good, extra players on Monday night to actually be able to replace them with if they don't wind up playing. So again, Godwin, Julio, even Gage, I wouldn't really expect them to play. I would make your lineup decisions this weekend under the assumption that they won't. Giants wide receiver Sterling Shepard on IR, Kadarius Toney, hamstring, Wan'Dale Robinson, knee, both are out. 3 wide receiver sets, Nick, of Richie James, Kenny Galladay, and of course, David Sills. Apparently, Richie James is the DFS darling of the week. Miss me with that, man. I don't want anything to do with this passing game. There is one player for the New York Giants that we care about in fantasy football, and it's Saquon Barkley, my overall RB1 of the week. Like, come on, man. We're not doing this with Richie James.
I doth protest. I wrote up Richie James. He gets to play against a guy named Kyler Gordon, who is maybe the worst cornerback in the NFL. He's got the league's highest explosive pass plays allowed rate of 7.4. It's just a full 1.9% higher than the next closest NFL player, which is I think the other guy. Yeah, Kendall Vildor, the other corner on the Bears. So I know that Richie James is not a very good NFL player, but he's earning the targets over the other Giants receivers. And this, I think projectable volume can be a trap, but they don't have anybody else. So GPP Fields, I say go for it. Redraft, probably too shaky, but GPP, I dig it.
That's fair. Yeah. And I don't want to hear about him approaching cash lineups, especially if we continue to see this weather not look good. Again, in New York, there's expected 15, 20 mile per hour wind and a chance for rain. So if you're going to play Richie James, please don't do it in, inclement weather. Come on. We got families out here, everyone. All right. Cardinals wide receiver room, still all sorts of banged up. Marquise Brown popped up on the injury report on Friday. Another one of these, though, foot and rest, and he was still limited in practice. So I'm not sure if, I don't know what happened here, man. It'd be nice to have any sort of details. And this is going to be a 4:00 game in Carolina. So if you have Hollywood Brown on the team, I wouldn't assume he's out, but you really should try to be careful about who you're going to be putting up. If you happen to have, an incredibly blessed lineup and it's like Marquise Brown or even someone like, Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, like Curtis Samuel, I give a long look to those other guys. So really hoping that by Sunday morning, we have a better picture of Marquise Brown. If we get he's going to test it out in pregame and see how he's doing, that's when I would go with those other guys. AJ Green out. Greg Dortch, good to go. Of course he is. Rondale Moore questionable with a hamstring injury. Hopkins out for another week, just staring us down from the fantasy bench. Antoine Wesley still on IR with the groin injury. So it's wild seeing what Greg Dortch is doing every single week, Nick, in full PPR. AJ Green's out too. This is such a freaking banged up wide receiver room. If Hollywood is somehow out, man, Greg Dortch is going to have to be like a top 24 wide receiver. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Zach Ertz is going to eat too. If Marquise Brown is in and Rondale's back, then I don't really want to play Greg Dortch because I think we could have, unfortunately, a bit of split usage in the slot between Dortch and Rondale. Do you have a read on this situation at all? The Panthers are favored to win a football game right now over Kyler Murray, and part of me can't believe it. And then the other part of me listens to what I've said in the last 60 seconds, and it's like, how are they going to move the football?
Yeah, Kyler, he's just going to put the team on his back and bring the ball down the field. But if Rondale Moore is active, then no, you can't play Dortch. If Rondale Moore is inactive, then like the Dortch, and oh my God, if Marquise Brown is also out, then he is a top 24 wide receiver, and we're just don't question it, just roll with it.
I haven't heard light the Dortch before. I'm starting to like him more and more after that. I can get behind lighting the Dortch. All right, Chiefs wide receiver MVS abdomen questionable. He did get back to practice on Friday. Mecole Hardman with the heel is good to go. So I think Justin Watson would sadly just replace MVS, not Sky Moore. So it'd be fair to give Juju a little bit of a bump, and maybe Mecole Hardman too. But we get it. It's Travis Kelce. It's Patrick Mahomes. If you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, yeah, you can start him. He's obviously scoring his touchdowns, but not the super upside guy. And that's where Juju, I think, stands too. Someone where, yeah, he's not going to be in the top 20 options, but he still is a full-time member of an explosive Chiefs offense. I'm still okay with going to Juju as more of a wide receiver 3. With the Raiders, Hunter Renfrow out again this week with a concussion, so Mac Hollins will once again have a bigger role. Went for 150 plus last week. I wouldn't be, that ready to go back to Mac Hollins here. Seems a bit point chasey for me. What I love this week, man, in tournaments, go back to Darren Waller. Dropped 2 touchdowns last week, had a 30-yard gain nullified. Like, the big thing for Darren Waller too, Foster Moreau's out, the backup tight end that usually has actually kept him off the field for a bit. So Darren Waller, man, might not leave the field out there. And we know how good he is. It was one terrible week. A lot of players have them. Waller's happened to come last week. Quit living in the past. Let's look ahead to week 4 and live in the present. Devontae Adams, always your upside wide receiver 1. So Mac Hollins is someone that I think will be in the top 48. I mean, he earned that, but he's right there, like, to me, with guys like Jahan Dotson, Robert Woods, Darnell Mooney, guys that definitely don't need to be in starting lineups. And as I say those names, I probably still put most of them ahead of Mac Hollins as well. Cowboys wide receiver Michael Gallup, not listed on the final injury report, and seemingly will be making his 2022 season debut. So, Nick, I think we've talked about this already. Like, we want at least 1 week of Michael Gallup usage in the books before we can really fire him up as the wide receiver 3. We're hoping that he can consistently be in this offense, especially without Dak this week. I don't think there's any need to go with Michael Gallup. What this does do is it makes me, completely off Noah Brown as a potential flex option. Look, we have CeeDee Lamb. If you have the running backs, you might be playing them too. It's mostly just CeeDee Lamb and Dallas though this week.
Agreed. Yeah. And wide receivers can kind of struggle coming off ACLs. So I definitely believe in waiting on Gallup to see, what he can do.
Patriots wide receiver Jacoby Myers, limited all week. He is listed as questionable. Again, we don't know what the Patriots are seemingly ever doing here. If he is again sidelined, Devontae Parker has a little bit, more of a bump as we saw last week, but with Brian Hoyer under center, yeah, just stay the hell away if you can all help it. Again, Patriots are implied to score a week low 15.5 points. I can't overstate how horrendous that is. Jaguars wide receiver Zay Jones. So he got downgraded to a DNP on Thursday and he got a limited session on Friday. If he plays, I love Zay Jones at 4,200 over Richie freaking James at 4,000 on DraftKings. And hey, in redraft, man, and just season long borderline wide receiver 3. If sideline Christian Kirk, even more of a must start. And then we get Marvin Jones, Evan Ingram, and maybe even Travis Etienne doing their things. All right, I want to give a shout out to our friends here at Sleeper. Let me get our little banner up. We do every week. Love our Sleeper of the day, powered by Sleeper, my favorite app to go play fantasy football on. But I'm actually going to do a prop bet here for our Sleeper segment. Nick, Travis Etienne over 17.5 receiving yards this week. He's already beat that in each of the first 3 weeks of the season. He got 18, 30, and 33 receiving yards. The Jaguars are 6.5 point dogs. We might finally see them not win by 24 points, not win by 28 points, actually have to play from behind like they did in week 1 when Etienne actually outsnapped James Robinson. Etienne is averaging a position high 10.1 yards per catch. The Eagles have allowed the 8th most catches to opposing running backs, and Travis Etienne is objectively really fast. Nick, come on. This makes all the sense in the world, man. And it's not a complete hatred on James Robinson, but this is a 2 running back backfield that we've had back-to-back games with absolute best case scenario game script for James Robinson. And I'm not so sure we're getting that this week.
Yeah, I've heard a number of people talk about the fact that the Jaguars, I don't think they played from behind at all this year. Travis Etienne, I was also tweeting today, I think this is the final chapter in the buy low window on Travis Etienne. Game is very likely to shoot out. We mentioned the run defenses, or at least the Jags run defense earlier on. The same goes obviously with Jordan, 6'7" or whatever, Jordan Davis and all those guys. I think that Travis Etienne can have a fine day, and I think that 17.5 receiving yards is very doable.
Couldn't agree more about Etienne being a great prime low candidate. Prime buy low candidate if you can still get to him there. It's just the reality that now he's being almost valued like he's just being valued less than what his role is right now. He hasn't had a chance to cash in on the big plays or just a bunch of the receptions that he will. Once he gets those, man, he's going to be valued more than now. I understand the third or fourth round price that you had to pay to go get him. That's why those exact managers are probably going to be pissed off about it and more willing to give him up for a bit of a discount. And God forbid something else happens to James Robinson, ETN's a weekly top 12 option. Same thing goes the other way, obviously, if something happens to ETN. But again, these two running back backfield, that's why with Cam Akers and Travis Etienne, when people were freaking out, it's like, I get it. You can't really start him right now, but let's not, get too wild, because if something happens, one injury away from having an awfully big role. You guys saw how Jamal Williams and Khalil Herbert just jumped up the ranks, and dominated conversation after one injury. Same thing, more than possible in the LA and Jacksonville backfields as well. Couple wide receivers that are fine. Devontae Smith, back issue, not listed on the final report. Continue to fire him up as that wide receiver 2 that he's been over the past 2 weeks. Treylon Burke, perfectly fine with that illness, came back and had full practices on Thursday and Friday. Kyle Phillips, their slot receiver, is questionable with a shoulder injury. Small downgrade to Burks if Phillips is going to suit up and play. I do think we could maybe see Tannehill and company sneakily put up some decent passing numbers against the Colts this week, especially if they fall behind pretty quick. But Burks still someone that I think his buy low window is maybe closing as well. So Treylon Burks and ETN, maybe, just maybe, we get these rooks, and ETN's basically a rookie. We get them going this week. Bears wide receiver Velus Jones might actually make his debut, at 29 years of age. First one to make that joke with the hamstring injury, listed as questionable, but yeah, it does appear to have a chance to play. Got the full practice in on Friday. Byron Pringle is out with the calf issue. Look, it's this Bears passing game. Like, if you can actually start anyone from it, then you're a stronger man than me. Mooney, again, I think he's my wide receiver 50 on the week. Of course, you're not playing Velus. And finally, Laviska Shenault, awesome ass touchdown last week. Unfortunately, questionable with the hamstring injury. Not that you were really looking to play him anyway. Before we get to tight end, I want to quickly pay a bill or two. Got to love our sponsors out there. And today's sponsor just happens to be one of my favorites out there, Vuri. Basically, these awesome people sent me a jacket. They do clothes. They're incredibly versatile and comfortable. I haven't gotten it just yet, so I can tell you guys exactly how comfortable it is next week. But Nick, I'm not much of a fashion guy. I think some of the fashion rules are bullshit. Like, after Labor Day, they always say, like, you can't wear white. Maybe you can wear white, whatever it is. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, how come that's a rule? And so I went back and I looked it up at one point. Apparently it was because back in the 16th, 17th century or whatever, all these rich people were getting pissed off at the poor people catching up to their wardrobes. So they had to start making these new rules to basically expand the overall kind of wardrobe of fashion so they could continue to, show off their wealth and all that. So either way, I'm not someone that, is a big fashion guy, but all right, look at Vuri, man. It seems like the sort of place where if you do like clothes and you like being comfortable, that it is exactly what you need to go to. So not exactly sure if this is, the best pitch for a fashion place out there, but you know what? I'm a fan of it. It's the sort of stuff that, I can see myself throwing on there. And for our listeners, they're actually giving you guys 20% off your first purchase. Go on and get comfortable with Vuri. That's VUORI.com/PFF pod and go get that 20% off. And also, folks, we do have a PFF app right now. I will be back on Twitter, 11:30 a.m. basically every Sunday. I try to get to as many start-sit questions as I can. I do in the PFF fantasy football community, so I don't blast out notifications to, anyone that's got me on noties on Twitter. But I can't get to them all. But that's why in our PFF app, we have a start-sit tool that takes me, Kevin Cole, Nathan Yonke, all of our ranks. You put in your 2 players on the app, and it tells you who we would start. When you guys ask me on Twitter who I would start, what do? I go to my ranks and I see who I would start when I thought about this, with a clear mind earlier in the week. So PFF. And yes, Val, 2 guys that haven't seen sun in a long time, because we're getting the ranks so damn good in the PFF app, the start sit app. And it's always a great day to be great. I will say, I saw everyone's always got something to say about how damn white I am on these podcasts, and it's all good. It's not the first time I've heard it. I got a lot of sun this summer, man, which is sad that this is like, the more tannish version of myself, but hey, it is what it is. Born this way, and I got a cool hack game, so it is what it is. Let's talk some tight ends now, Nick, after that just ridiculous interjection there. So Bills tight end Dawson Knox officially questionable with a back and hip injury. If active, touchdown dependent tight end one. Unfortunately, hasn't been scoring those touchdowns, but I'm not giving up after just 3 weeks. Still someone the Bills obviously really value long term. Just look at the contract they gave him right before the season started. Josh Allen remains really freaking good at football. Browns tight end David Njoku. This one's interesting. So he got downgraded to a DNP out of nowhere on Thursday with a knee injury. Then he practices full on Friday and he's good to go for Sunday. So Nick, it's enough for me in DFS to go with Evan Ingram if I'm going to go down that deep in the salary. Ingram's at 3.4K on DraftKings. Njoku's at 3.7K. And just in terms of season long, I have Njoku this week as my tight end 12. He's right there next to Ingram. I would still start guys like Knox, Higbee, and Gerald Everett over David Njoku. I think with him being injured, man, I don't think we saw this major role change for Njoku last week. I think it was a big week, and he's a talented guy, and he could certainly do it again. But this offense is still going first and foremost through Amari Cooper. And it's not like last week was our first game that we saw Njoku play without Austin Hooper. If you look at the now like 6 or 7 games that they've played without Hooper, Harrison Bryant is like pretty much right there with them in terms of total targets. So am I not moving Njoku up high enough, Nick? I feel like that it was a primetime game that everyone's kind of pissed off that they benched him for, but I don't think necessarily, again, he's a top 12 tight end for me, but not someone that we just absolutely need to jam in the lineups.
No, I think that's fine. He's got a negative 9% matchup advantage rating on PFF's tight end matchup chart against Rashaan Evans, Atlanta Falcons linebacker. I think that you can roll with him if you want to, because some teams are starting to do this thing where they rest guys on Thursdays instead of Wednesdays. And given the injuries going on in Cleveland that we talked about, they may just have been playing it safe. We can't know that. But I do also really like Evan Ingram. I know that the Philadelphia Eagles linebacker coverage has improved, but that is a position and an area of the field that they deprioritize in their team building. And so tight ends do have a good history of producing against the Eagles. So I think that Evan Ingram, I think I actually might have written him up as a start at 4 for 4 this week. So I think Ingram is a totally fine start over Njoku this week.
Lions tight end TJ Hawkinson. Once I update my lovely ranks, he'll be up there as the tight end 6 overall behind only Waller, Pitts, Kittle, Kelsey, and Andrews. Take away DeAndre Swift, take away Monra St. Brown. Even Chark and Josh Reynolds are banged up. Again, Hawkinson does not even have an injury designation, so full expecting him to have the biggest game of the year, potentially. Why not? Like, what could possibly go wrong, Nick? And, I'm jinxing that as I'm saying it, so come on. Come on, Hawk, get those targets. Cowboys tight end Dalton Schultz officially questionable with the knee injury. I think there's enough of a chance of limited snaps and or effectiveness without Dak Prescott to basically make him more of this borderline tight end 1 as opposed to the locked in starter. So, Nick, would you go, if active, Schultz or Njoku? I lean Njoku, and honestly, probably Ingram as well.
Yep, me too. Yep. Both of those guys over Schultz.
It's just not the week. He was only limited. I think they trust Jake Ferguson enough to make things rough on Schultz this week. Just not this week. We'll have Dak back hopefully in week 5. And then we'll get back to Schultz as our weekly top 6 option after hopefully he's healthier as well. Titans tight end Austin Hooper, good to go with a neck injury. It just feels so weird to say that. But yeah, he's apparently good to go with the neck injury. Not a big deal. That's the NFL. Regularly rotates multiple players at the position, though, so he's not a realistic fantasy option anyway. Raiders tight end Foster Moreau out with a knee injury. Again, Darren Waller, monster week incoming. I absolutely love it. Bears tight end Ryan Griffin listed as doubtful with an Achilles. Cole Kmet, throw up in your mouth and throw him in the tight end spot if you have no one else. But please, for the love of God, try to find someone else. Chargers tight end Donald Parham, questionable with the hamstring. If he's back, it's just going to lower that Gerald Everett ceiling just a little bit. But still, I mean, Parham could easily just kind of come in and take away stuff from Trey McKitty and Richard Rodgers far more than anything Everett gets. So I'm still going to have Everett in my top 12, regardless of Parham's final status. And with the Texans, Brevin Jordan, once again out. Pharaoh Brown, questionable. They're going to bring up Jordan Akins and render all of them obsolete fantasy assets anyway. Few just other notes here. Ravens left tackle Ronnie Stanley seemed to be trending towards getting back after getting him full practice to start the week. He got listed with the wrist and ankle again on Friday, so he actually didn't practice on Friday, but obviously if he starts, nice boost for the entire Ravens offense. Bills secondary, all kinds of banged up. Micah Hyde on IR with the neck injury. Tre'Davious White still on the pup. Jordan Poyer questionable with the foot injury. They signed old man Xavier Rhodes. Now he's hurt with a hamstring injury. Christian Benford, Dane Jackson, the other cornerbacks are hurt. So again, it sucks that we have to worry about the weather in this Baltimore Bills game. But if not, man, Rashad Bateman to the freaking moon this week. And obviously Mark Andrews, but he basically already lives on the moon at this point. So Browns, the end, Myles Garrett, shoulder and biceps after that car crash. He's questionable. So is Jadeveon Clowney with an ankle injury. Neither practice all week. So even if they are out there, I think reasonable to expect them to be at less than 100%. Again, good news from Marcus Mariota, Cordero Patterson if he's out there. Just everyone. You don't get to play against Myles Garrett. You know, you're going to be – those quarterbacks just probably have a bigger peace of mind you can imagine. Mentioned the Patriots' secondary problems. Safety Kyle Duggar, safety Adrian Phillips, safety Joshua Bledsoe, and cornerback Jalen Mills, all listed as questionable. Not exactly great when you're facing the two-time reigning, defending, undisputed MVP of the NFL. And finally, 49ers left tackle Trent Williams expected to miss, what they say here, Nick, several weeks for Trent Williams, right? I think I heard that.
Yeah, it's a high ankle, right?
That's it. Yeah, so he's out. It just sucks. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, I think the biggest thing is potentially George Kittle just having to pass block more. You okay? Nick is good. Probably got a little dog running around or something. But hey, guess what? We're done anyway. Life is still good here on the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey, if you guys got a few more questions in the YouTube chat, I got time to get to them. So send them on through from R.A. Avila. Should I play Debo versus the Rams or Curtis Samuel versus Dallas? You drafted Debo Samuel in the second round, man, and now you're talking about benching him. Like, come on, man. Give me Debo Samuel 8 days of the week. Pretty funny, though, how we were looking for this year's like Debo Samuel. And so far, the closest guy, probably the dude with the same last name in Curtis Samuel. So not trying to be a dick to you, RA, but yes, please do pick Debo there. What there was juniors think about Tyler Conklin. I think I'll be a lot more psyched about Conklin after we get 1 week of evidence that Zach Wilson can just have this passing game as efficient as Joe Flacco. Fair play to the man. Like, they were putting up some nice production for the majority of that stint without Zach Wilson, and Conklin dominating the route share and stuff. Still not totally convinced that CJ Uzoma's out of the picture, but Nick, do you have rest of season's thoughts on Tyler Conklin?
Yeah, I think he's the top guy. I think he's played well enough that he'll be like, I don't think CJ Uzoma is a threat to him. I do think that we should wait to see what Zach Wilson's presence does to him. The guy that I do think that fantasy managers can still hang their hat on there is Garrett Wilson. He is going to go up against Cam Sutton of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who's been manning the slot. And Garrett Wilson has transitioned to being the starting slot receiver in New York over the last 3 weeks. And that's a matchup that I think he can win. It is still kind of shaky. I get that. But if Wilson is just kind of running free by a mile, I think hopefully Zach Wilson is able to hit him if that's the case.
That is the thing, man, with this Jets team. Like, I know the offensive line has had some injuries happen, so they're not as good as we thought they might be in the preseason, but they really did a good job surrounding Zach Wilson with enough guys to hopefully know if he can be the guy moving forward. Like, just imagine that, man, really putting your second year quarterback in a position so that, you can move on with them or not move on with them the next year. Like, maybe some Chicago could look at, but Brandon Cooks or Hollywood Brown. Again, I'm praying that one of Schefter or Rap Sheet tells us Sunday night what's going on with Marquise Brown, how serious this injury is. If we have no concern, Hollywood Brown's playing. He's fine. I'm going with Hollywood Brown. If it's a 50-50 thing, the Texans play at 1 o'clock. The Cardinals play at 4 o'clock. So in that case, I would go with Brandon Cooks. I think it's close enough to go ahead and just take the more sure thing. Francesco's wondering if it's insane to drop Allen Robinson to stash Kadarius Toney. Bro, I've struggled so hard to drop Toney from these teams. I can barely rationalize it. But for Allen Robinson, no, man, keep A-Rob. I think A-Rob's going to be okay. Maybe not, this like top 15 wide receiver like he was being made out to be in all those offseason fluff pieces, written about him. But at the same time, man, just a little bit of good luck goes his way over these last 2 weeks, and he would have had an additional 2 touchdowns. I don't think, I think we could see something more so in the wide receiver 2 range where he was drafted on sooner rather than later. Do we think Amari Cooper will keep up the production? Same with Michael Thomas when he comes back. Two really damn good wide receivers. Unfortunately, they deal with injuries, and that's kind of been a thing for both these guys over the years, where even though Cooper hasn't missed many games, he does play through the pain a lot, which is awesome, but we also see his effectiveness dip. And, to be fair, Jacoby Brissett playing great football. Do I think the Browns are going to have the 6th ranked scoring offense, for the next still 6-7 more games before Deshaun Watson comes back? Probably not. Maybe, probably not. And accordingly, I do think Cooper will settle in more so as this low-end wide receiver 2 that he hasn't been recently. He's been a freaking wide receiver 1, but, maybe we treated him a little too harshly as this wide receiver 3 to start the season. I don't think he's going to continue the wide receiver 1 stuff because he wasn't even doing that in Dallas really over the past 2 years, but low-end wide receiver 2 for Amari Cooper, and honestly pretty close with Michael Thomas with the way Chris Olave is emerging. I think that range for both guys is pretty fair. Rashad Penny or James Conner, got to be James Conner for me. And yeah, appreciate all you guys tuning in. Nick, let the folks know what you got over at pff.com for all you DFS diehards.
Yeah, so we have the DFS cheat sheet for week 4, and we've also got the top 5 wide receiver cornerback matchups to target and avoid.
Great day to be great, Sir Nick. And you can check out my positional previews. I'm changing up my articles next week, guys. I'm taking some advice I heard one time. Just because you make a mistake doesn't mean you need to take a long. Oh my God! Just because you make a mistake doesn't mean you should take a long time making it. I need to wordsmith that. But the point is, you mess up, don't just keep messing up for the next, 12 months. I'm going to get back to doing team by team stuff. I just felt like I was repeating myself with some of the articles. So new look running back feature coming on. I'm going to load up some bullet points right at the top to try to give you guys rankings, handcuffs, matchup notes, and then just get into one cool thing. I was just trying to avoid writing so many damn 8,000 word articles this year, but then I found myself kind of going in circles. So we're going to work a little smarter and work a little harder. Sometimes you get the best results from that. And again, new look on the wide receiver, tight end stuff as well. So yes, truly appreciate the support with the podcast, with the articles, with everything out there, and go have a hell of a week 4. It's a great day to be great, as I say 20 freaking million times every podcast, but there's worse things to say a lot. So it's all good. For Nick, I'm Ian. Thanks so much for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Until next time, take care, everybody.